You're in the dialogue. You've beaten all of their arguments. And then they shrug their shoulders or throw up their hands and say, I don't know, man. I don't know why. I don't know how to beat your arguments. I'm just not persuaded. Today, I want to tell you how to deal with that situation. This question came up recently on our Facebook page from one of our followers, and it was a great reminder that this is the kind of thing that happens a lot when you're into apologetics and you're having dialogues with people. And sometimes people just aren't persuaded in the moment, and they don't know why, they don't have a counter, but it's sort of like the conversation just peters out. And it can be really frustrating, especially when you're talking about something that you feel like is really important, like abortion or something like that, where people's lives are actually on the line. And you're just kind of feeling like, come on, man, like you got to do better than that. Like, this is a serious issue. I've beaten your arguments. Just admit it. Just like concede and have my view. Like, that's what we want to say. And of course, most of us don't actually say that, but it's super frustrating when you've put all this time and sometimes emotional energy into that dialogue. And so I have a few thoughts about this. The first thing to remember is you are not likely to change someone's mind in one day. Like, that doesn't happen very often. People usually need more time than that. They need maybe multiple dialogues with the same person, and ideally in the context of friendship where they trust the person, they think that the person is smart and thoughtful, and that way they're taking everything the person says more seriously, and it's easier for them to imagine adopting that person's view. But most of us are not going to change our minds in one day. You wouldn't change your mind in one day. You could meet up with David Boonin, one of the smartest pro-abortion choice philosophers in the world, and he could probably beat you in a debate, at least in the moment. He could probably stump you. And that doesn't mean that you are going to leave the restaurant or Starbucks or wherever you are instantly pro-choice. Like, you're going to take some time. Hopefully you're open-minded enough to seriously consider everything that he had to say and check it against what the smartest pro-life philosophers say. And then in the end, make up your mind, choose the view that seems to actually make the most sense at the end of the day. But I think sometimes we get too annoyed with people because we feel like they should be willing to change their mind in one day when we're not even willing to change our mind in one day, at least about most things. We need at least a little bit more time than that, even if you're open-minded. I'm an open-minded person. I typically need more than one day to change my mind, even if I've heard a really interesting or compelling argument. Having said that, I don't think that we should just give up when someone says, I don't know how to beat your argument. I don't know when personhood begins. I don't have any counter arguments to your personhood argument. I just think it's not a person. I don't really know why. I don't think that we should give up. I think that would be the easy mistake, which is to kind of let them off the hook a little bit. I mean, you could also be really obnoxious about it too. But on the other end of the spectrum, you could also let them off the hook too much and just be like, well, all right. Have a good day, and maybe you guys never talk about it again. I think there's a happy middle ground there where the best thing, and this is something that all of our staff tries to do really well when we do campus outreach, is to close strong, close the dialogue strong. When I'm in a conversation, I am a lot of times, I kind of feel like, or at least the idea in my head is that I'm kind of putting cash reserves in the bank, by being winsome, by being nice, by being funny, by being intriguing, and all those different things, not being a jerk to them. There's also things that I'm not doing. And hopefully that's building up this rapport basically in the bank. And especially at an outreach where you're probably not going to talk to this person again, I kind of want to close out my account. Like, I want to basically push as hard as I can in the end without pushing them further away from the view. So you can do that. You could do great for 99% of the conversation, and then that last percent push really, really strong and end up being kind of weird or obnoxious. And it could actually kind of erase all of the good that happened before, because that's the moment that they end up remembering, or that the feeling that you gave them in that moment is what they walk away with. And you might actually give them a psychological bad excuse in their head to discount what you said. And we don't want to do that, because that's what they want. And this is not just about pro-choice people. This is how we are wired. We are all in confirmation bias land. We don't want to change our minds. And so the intellectual lazy side of us is looking for an excuse, not to change our minds and to discount what this person said. And sometimes we'll do it just based on their personality or the way that they acted as opposed to their arguments, which isn't the best thing ever, okay? And so you don't want to give them a lame excuse to use to be like, whatever, and just move on and not kind of reconsider your argument in the quietness of their own dorm room or whatever, where they might actually begin to change their own mind. So we don't want to push too hard. We also don't want to push at all. I want to give a gentle push. I want to close strong. And so I'm going to say something like, hey, I totally get it. Most people don't change their minds in one day about something. I don't think I could change my mind in one day about something, at least not entirely. So totally fair. I want to give you my card because I would love to hear from you in the future. As you kind of consider this, you might think of some arguments that you wish that you had said in the moment. Don't you hate that when we just kind of, forget something or we get tongue-tied or whatever? I don't want you to feel like that. I would love to hear from you because I'm open-minded. And if you come up with a really great counter argument later that might beat my view, I want to hear from you because if I'm wrong about this, I want to change my mind. I want you to help me to do that. So please be in touch with me. But one final thought that I would love to leave you with is, if I'm right that abortion is the unjustified killing of thousands of babies every day, and you come to realize that there aren't actually any good counter arguments to what I've said today, then that is not just a shrug and move on moment. Like, I think you now actually have some level of responsibility because we've had this conversation, because now you have heard really good pro-life arguments that might actually be the best arguments. That's my view, having heard, I think, the best of both sides. And if you come to realize that there aren't very good counter arguments to what I said, then you should be pro-life. This should affect your life. This should affect the decisions that you make. It should affect the way that you talk about this issue with people, and maybe should even affect how you vote. Like those are a lot of things that you ought to consider. I don't want you to just walk away and just be like, that was an interesting thought exercise. Because again, this isn't a debate. We're not in fight mode. There are no winners and losers today. The question is, do we end up striving toward truth? Do we end up on the path toward believing more true things and fewer false things? And I don't want us to act like the way so many people in our society right now are acting, where they're just in fight mode and they don't want to change their mind, no matter how much evidence they see from the other side. Don't you hate it when, something that you care about, like the other side, doesn't matter? It seems like how much evidence they receive, they just can't change their mind. We don't want to be like that. We want to be open-minded. We want to be dedicated to truth. And so I just hope that you will consider what we've talked about today in the following weeks and months. And I hope that you will have the intellectual honesty to change your mind if the pro-life position has the best arguments. Basically what I'm doing, if you think of that idea that Greg Koukl, Stand to Reason, has talked about a lot of, you want someone to walk away with a pebble in their shoes, metaphorically speaking. You want them kind of walking away like, oh man, you said something really interesting. I don't know how to respond to that. Like, you want to do that. I'm basically trying to make it the biggest pebble I can. I want to surgically remove as many excuses as they might be able to come up with in the following hours, even if not days, to discount the really good arguments I've made, because it is hard to change your mind. But in the end, you should change your mind if you don't have the right view. And this is really, really serious. And it's like, I think I've just made the best arguments I've ever heard on this issue. Like, that should affect you. So I'm doing this thing where I'm being charitable. I'm saying, I get it. You don't have to try to change your mind in one moment. But the fact that we've had this conversation makes them culpable. It makes them responsible. They now have more knowledge about this topic, and especially good pro-life arguments, than they ever have before. And they need to do something with that if they're going to consider themselves an intellectually honest individual. And that goes for you, viewer. If you have received really compelling arguments from the other side on an issue, on some political or moral issue, then you need to not be intellectually lazy with that too. You should spend some time looking into that and seeing if maybe you ought to change your mind about that issue. And I know that has happened to me. I know that I've changed my mind about multiple important moral issues because I just learned more than I had before. And so, like, I'm not hard on myself for having had, from my current perspective, the wrong view before. It's like, yeah, I didn't really know better. Maybe I'm culpable for not having to work harder to figure it out earlier, but I kind of think that's being too hard on myself because everyone's busy. You can't, spend a ton of time researching the smartest side of every single political issue that there is. But what I've tried to do is when I come across interesting arguments, counter arguments to my view, I try to read that with an open mind and take that seriously. And I'm also trying to, on a consistent basis, expose myself to those arguments or to places where I might find those arguments, whether that's Reddit, whether that's the Tangle e-newsletter that I've talked about before. And we've got a great podcast episode of me interviewing the head of Tangle. I think that is a really great way to step out of confirmation bias. So I do want to challenge you. Have the intellectual honesty that you wish your pro-choice friends or the people that you dialogue with have also.